Evan Brooks stood in his own kitchen, watching his boss, the most powerful woman in the company, press trembling fingers against her temples, mascara smudged beneath bloodshot eyes. When Rachel Monroe finally looked up and asked the question that would shatter his carefully constructed world, her voice was barely a whisper. "Evan, did we sleep together last night?" In that moment, every sacrifice he'd made as a widowed father, every late night he'd worked to prove himself worthy, every ounce of dignity he'd fought to maintain, all of it hung in the balance of how he answered. If this story grabs you, stick around until the end, because what starts as one man's worst nightmare becomes something neither of them saw coming. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's dive in. The first thing Evan Brooks noticed when he opened his eyes was that Mia's bedroom door was already open. The second thing was the smell of coffee he hadn't made. The third thing, the thing that sent ice through his veins, was the sound of expensive heels clicking slowly across his kitchen floor. He shot upright in bed, yesterday's clothes still clinging to his body, and the events of the previous night crashed over him like a wave he'd been too exhausted to see coming. Rachel, his boss, in his house. "No, no, no," Evan muttered, swinging his legs off the bed. His temples throbbed with the particular ache that came from too little sleep and too much stress. He glanced at his phone. 6:47 a.m. Mia's dance recital shirt was still draped over the chair where he'd thrown it before everything went sideways, before he'd made the choice that now threatened everything. He found her in the kitchen, standing at his counter in yesterday's red cocktail dress, considerably less pristine than it had been at the company's anniversary celebration. Her dark hair, usually swept into that perfect executive bun, hung in tangled waves around her shoulders. She was holding his daughter's favorite mug, the one with the cartoon ballerina that Mia had insisted on buying with her allowance. "Rachel!" His voice came out rougher than he intended. She turned, and Evan saw something in her face that he'd never seen in the 2 years he'd worked for her. Genuine fear. "Evan." She set down the mug carefully, as if it might shatter. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He stayed in the doorway, maintaining distance, already knowing what was coming, but hoping against hope he was wrong. Rachel's hands were shaking. She gripped the counter edge. Did we sleep together last night?" The question hung in the air between them like a live wire. Evan felt something crack inside his chest. Not his heart exactly, but something close. The assumption beneath her question, the fear in her eyes that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with what it would mean for her if they had. He understood it. He hated that he understood it. "No." The word came out flat, final. "Nothing happened, Rachel." Her entire body sagged with relief so profound it was almost insulting. She pressed both palms against the counter, head dropping forward, breathing like she'd just run a marathon. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank God." Evan walked to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup with steady hands that betrayed none of the storm raging inside him, and took a long drink before speaking again. "You want to know what did happen?" Rachel lifted her head, meeting his eyes for the first time. Up close, he could see the smudged mascara, the exhaustion carved into her features, the vulnerability that Monday morning's boardroom would never witness. "Yes," she said quietly. "Please." Evan set down his coffee. "Yesterday was my daughter's dance recital. I left work early, got your approval, remember? You signed off on it yourself 3 weeks ago." Rachel nodded slowly, pieces clearly not yet fitting together in her mind. "The recital ended at 7. I had Mia in the car, heading home, when you called." He watched recognition flicker across her face. "You were at that celebration, the 20-year anniversary thing at the Meridian, and you were struggling. I don't remember calling you." Her voice had gone very small. "You didn't mean to. It was a pocket dial, I think. But I could hear everything. You arguing with someone, the sound of breaking glass, people talking about you like you weren't even there." Evan crossed his arms, the memory flooding back with uncomfortable clarity. "One of them said your name, said someone should call you a cab before you embarrassed yourself more. Another one laughed." Rachel closed her eyes. "I called you back. You answered on the 6th ring, and you were crying." Evan's voice softened despite himself. You said you were fine, that you just needed to get home. I asked if you had someone to drive you. And I said yes, Rachel whispered, eyes still closed. I lied. Yeah. So I called the restaurant back, asked to speak to the manager, described you. He confirmed you were there, confirmed you were in no shape to drive. Evan picked up his coffee again, needed something to do with his hands. Then I had a choice to make. Rachel opened her eyes, and in them Evan saw the question she was afraid to ask. I had Mia in the back seat, wearing her recital costume, holding the trophy she'd just won for best team performance. She was so proud of that trophy, Rachel. Been practicing for months. He paused, remembering his daughter's face when he'd turned the car around. And I had my boss, drunk, vulnerable, and about to make decisions she'd regret, alone at a company event where people were already talking. You came. It wasn't a question. I came. Told Mia we had to make a quick stop to help someone who needed us. Pulled up to the Meridian at 7:43 p.m. You were sitting on the curb outside. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. I don't remember that at all. You probably don't remember me helping you into my car either, or Mia asking if you were okay, or you telling my 7-year-old daughter that her dress was the prettiest thing you'd ever seen. Evan's throat tightened at the memory. You cried again when she let you hold her trophy. Oh, God, Rachel's voice broke. Evan, I'm not done. He cut her off, not unkindly. I asked where you lived. You tried to give me your address but couldn't remember the street number, kept saying you just wanted to go home, but you couldn't tell me where home was. He gestured around the kitchen. So I brought you here. Put you in my daughter's room because it has the only other real bed. Mia slept with me. Rachel was crying now, silent tears tracking through yesterday's makeup. You asked me to stay while you fell asleep, said you didn't want to be alone. So I sat in the chair by the door until you were out, then I checked on you twice during the night to make sure you were okay. Evan met her eyes directly. That's what happened. Nothing else. Nothing remotely close to what you were afraid to ask me. The silence that followed was broken only by the kitchen clock ticking and the distant sound of birds outside the window. I need you to understand something, Rachel finally said, her voice steady despite the tears. That fear you saw, that wasn't about you specifically. It's about what my life has become. She wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand. My divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. 16 years of marriage, gone, and last night was the first company event where I had to show up alone, where everyone knew I was alone, where I could feel them watching me. Evan said nothing, just listened. I didn't plan to drink that much. She laughed bitterly. I had 3 glasses of wine, and apparently that was 2.5 too many for someone who hasn't eaten since breakfast. The room started spinning, and suddenly I was that woman, the divorced executive falling apart in public. Exactly what everyone expected. Is that why you called me? Evan asked quietly. Even if you don't remember it? Rachel looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. I must have known you were safe, that you wouldn't... She trailed off. Wouldn't take advantage, Evan finished. Yeah, that's the assumption. The edge in his voice made her flinch. That came out wrong, she said quickly. I know what you meant, Rachel, and you're right. I am safe. I'm the reliable guy, the one who shows up early and stays late, the one who'll rearrange his whole night to make sure his boss gets home in one piece. Evan set down his mug with deliberate care. I'm the one nobody worries about. Rachel stared at him, and for the first time since she'd asked that terrible question, she seemed to see him as something other than her subordinate. I should go, she said softly. Let you get back to your morning. Your daughter, Mia, she must be wondering where you are. She's at my sister's. I called her last night, asked if she could keep Mia until noon today. Figured you'd need time to wake up, get your bearings. Evan moved toward the doorway. Your car's still at the Meridian. I can drive you to get it, or I can call you a cab. Your choice. You'd drive me. Rachel's voice held a note of wonder, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Yeah, Rachel, I would, because that's what decent people do for each other. He paused, even when the person they're helping assumes the worst of them. The words landed like he meant them to, not cruel, but honest enough to sting. Rachel picked up her clutch from the counter, checked her reflection in the microwave door, and grimaced. I look like exactly what I am, a woman who made terrible choices and had to be rescued by her employee. She turned to face him. I'll take the cab. I've already disrupted your life enough. It's not a disruption. Yes, it is. You had plans with your daughter. You sacrificed your evening because I couldn't control myself at a party. Rachel's composure was returning, that executive armor sliding back into place. And now I've invaded your home, monopolized your morning, and asked you a question that implied you might be the kind of man who... Her voice broke again. I'm mortified, Evan. Truly. Don't be. Evan pulled out his phone. I'll call that cab. While they waited, an uncomfortable silence settled over the kitchen. Rachel stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than Evan had ever seen her look. He busied himself rinsing out the coffee mugs, giving her space to collect herself. Can I ask you something? Rachel's voice was quiet. Sure. Why did you come? Really? She turned from the window. You had every reason not to. You had your daughter with you. It was late. You'd already put in a full day at work. Most people would have just called me that cab and gone home. Evan dried his hands on the dish towel, considering his answer. My wife died 3 years ago, cancer. It was fast, 6 months from diagnosis to the end. He saw Rachel's expression shift to sympathy, but he pushed forward. The last few weeks she was in and out of consciousness, confused, scared, and what terrified her most was being alone when she was vulnerable. Rachel's hand went to her chest. I couldn't be there every second. I had Mia to take care of, bills to pay, life still happening whether I was ready or not. But whenever I could be there, whenever she needed someone to just sit with her, to make sure she was safe, I was. Evan met Rachel's eyes. So when I heard you on that phone, heard you scared and alone, I didn't think about the inconvenience. I thought about what it feels like to need someone and not have them show up. The cab horn sounded outside. Rachel didn't move toward the door. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything. Evan walked to the front door, opened it. Your cab's here. She followed him, pausing at the threshold. Monday morning? Will be exactly like every other Monday morning, Evan said firmly. You're my boss. I'm the project coordinator. This doesn't change anything at work. But it changes something, Rachel said softly. Doesn't it? Evan thought about the question she'd asked in his kitchen, about the relief in her eyes when he'd said no, about the way she'd assumed the worst before even considering he might have simply done the right thing. Yeah, he said. I guess it does. Rachel stepped out onto the porch, then turned back. Evan, thank you for everything, for coming when you didn't have to, for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself, for being exactly who you are. He nodded, said nothing. She walked down the steps toward the waiting cab, and Evan was about to close the door when she stopped halfway down the path and turned around. The woman who won your heart, Rachel said, the one who married you and gave you that beautiful little girl, she was incredibly lucky. I hope she knew that. Evan's throat tightened. I was the lucky one. Rachel smiled, a real smile this time, sad but genuine. Monday morning, then. Monday morning. He watched the cab pull away, watched until it turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Then he closed the door, leaned against it, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. Mia wants to know if she can have pancakes. I told her to ask you. Evan smiled despite everything, typed back. Pancakes are fine. I'll pick her up at noon, tell her I have a story about helping someone who needed us. The response came quickly. She's already telling everyone at breakfast that you're a hero. What did you do? The right thing, Evan typed, which is apparently noteworthy these days. He pocketed his phone and looked around his kitchen, at the mug Rachel had held, at the chair she'd stood beside, at the space she'd occupied for those strange, tense minutes. The morning light caught the edge of Mia's recital picture on the refrigerator, his daughter mid-leap in her costume, face bright with joy. That was what mattered. That was what he'd protected by bringing Rachel here instead of leaving her to the mercy of strangers or her own impaired judgment. Mia's ability to see her father as someone who helped people, who showed up when others walked away. But as Evan cleaned up the coffee cups and wiped down the counter, he couldn't shake the sound of Rachel's voice asking that question. The assumption embedded in it, the relief that had followed his denial. Did we sleep together? Not. Did something happen I should know about? Not. How did I end up here? But the specific, pointed question that revealed exactly what she'd feared most, that he, in a position of trust, might have taken advantage of her vulnerability. And her relief when he said no hadn't been relief that nothing inappropriate had happened. It had been relief that he hadn't done anything inappropriate. The distinction cut deeper than Evan wanted to admit. He'd spent 2 years at Monroe & Associates, proving himself as more than just a single dad looking for flexible hours. He'd worked late, taken on extra projects, never complained about the commute or the deadlines. He'd been professional, competent, reliable. Safe. That's what Rachel had called him, even if she hadn't used that exact word. Safe. The guy you could pass out around and wake up untouched. The one who'd rescue you without expecting anything in return. Evan had always thought those were compliments. Now he wasn't so sure. His phone buzzed again. Another text, but not from his sister. From Rachel. I know I said Monday morning would be normal, but I need you to know I meant everything I said on your porch. Thank you for seeing me as a person who needed help, not just your boss. That means more than you know. Evan stared at the message for a long moment before responding. You don't owe me thanks for basic human decency, but you're welcome. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, not many people would have done what you did, especially not for someone they didn't have to help. That's not basic decency. That's character. He didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. He just set down the phone and went to take a shower to wash away the residue of a night that had started with his daughter's triumph and ended with his boss's crisis. Under the hot water, Evan let himself acknowledge the truth he'd been avoiding. He was angry. Not at Rachel for drinking too much or for calling him, or even for that terrible question this morning. He was angry at the situation, at the impossible position she'd put him in without meaning to, at the fact that doing the right thing had somehow highlighted everything he hated about how the world saw him. Reliable, trustworthy, safe, never dangerous, never exciting, never the kind of man a woman feared or desired in equal measure, just safe. His wife had loved him for that stability, had told him countless times that his steadiness was what made her feel secure in a world that often felt chaotic. But Sarah had also seen other things in him, passion, humor, the capacity for spontaneity that he'd suppressed after she died, after Mia became his sole responsibility. Sarah had seen him as a whole person. Rachel saw him as a solution to a problem. Evan shut off the water, dried himself with rough efficiency, and got dressed for a day that now felt completely unmoored from the one he'd planned. He was supposed to sleep in, make Mia's favorite breakfast, maybe take her to the park to celebrate her recital performance. Instead, he'd woken up to his boss in his kitchen, terrified that he'd violated her trust, relieved to discover he was exactly the kind of man who wouldn't. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. By the time he picked up Mia at noon, Evan had managed to package the morning into a narrative his daughter could understand. Miss Rachel had needed help getting home safely, so Daddy had made sure she was okay, just like they'd talked about doing for people who needed kindness. Mia had absorbed this with the straightforward morality of 7-year-olds. Did you make sure she had water? You always tell me drunk people need water. I did, sweetheart. And did you check on her in the night, like you check on me when I have bad dreams? Yes. Then you did exactly right, Daddy. Mia had hugged him fiercely. Aunt Jenny says you're a good man. I think she's right. Now, as Evan watched his daughter practice her recital routine in their living room, he tried to hold on to that simple clarity. He had done the right thing. That mattered more than his bruised ego or his complicated feelings about Rachel's assumptions. But when his phone buzzed with another message, this one a calendar notification for Monday's 9 a.m. staff meeting, Evan felt his stomach tighten. Monday morning, back to normal. Except nothing felt normal anymore. The weekend passed in its usual rhythm: grocery shopping, laundry, playground time, bedtime stories. Evan threw himself into father mode, grateful for the distraction Mia provided from the thoughts circling his mind like sharks. Sunday evening, after Mia was asleep, he sat at his kitchen table with a beer he didn't really want and tried to sort through what he was feeling. Resentment? A little, though he hated admitting it. Anger? More than he wanted to carry into Monday. Hurt? Yeah. That was the core of it. Hurt that Rachel's first thought had been fear of what he might have done, not gratitude for what he had done. But underneath all of that was something else, something Evan had been avoiding since Rachel walked out his door. The recognition that he'd been invisible to her until he became useful. That in 2 years of working together, of professional respect and cordial interactions, she'd never really seen him as anything other than a good employee. And now she'd seen him as a good man, but only in the context of what he'd done for her. The question was whether that bothered him because it was true, or because he'd wanted her to see him differently. Evan took a long drink of beer and forcibly redirected his thoughts. Rachel's perception of him didn't matter. What mattered was maintaining professionalism at work, protecting his job, ensuring Mia's stability. Those were the priorities. Everything else was just noise. His phone lit up one more time before he went to bed. A message from Rachel. I hope you had a good weekend with Mia. See you tomorrow. Simple, professional, appropriate. Evan typed back, You too. See you Monday? Then he turned off his phone, checked on his sleeping daughter one last time, and went to bed with the strange, unsettled feeling that something fundamental had shifted in his carefully ordered world, and he had no idea yet whether that shift would break everything or build something new. Either way, Monday morning was coming, and with it, the answer to the question neither of them had asked. What happens when the safe choice becomes the complicated one? Evan fell asleep with that question unanswered, dreaming of red cocktail dresses and kitchen conversations and the particular weight of being exactly who people expected you to be. Nothing more, nothing less. Just safe. Always safe. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that matched Evan's mood perfectly. He dropped Mia at school 15 minutes early, sat in the parking lot watching rain streak down his windshield, and tried to convince himself that today would be just another day at Monroe and Associates. The pep talk didn't work. By the time he walked through the office doors at 8:47 a.m., his shirt was damp from the sprint across the parking lot, and his coffee had gone lukewarm. The reception area hummed with its usual Monday energy, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the coffee maker gurgling in the break room. Evan! Marcus from accounting caught him at the elevator. How was the recital? Mia nail it? She did great. Best team performance. That's my girl. Marcus grinned. Hey, you hear about the anniversary party? Apparently Monroe got completely wasted. Dave from legal said she was a total mess. Evan's jaw tightened. I wouldn't know. I left early for the recital, remember? Right. Well, you didn't miss much except the drama. Should have seen her. Marcus stopped abruptly, his eyes tracking something over Evan's shoulder. Morning, Ms. Monroe. Evan turned. Rachel stood 3 feet away, clearly having heard at least part of Marcus's commentary. She wore her standard Monday armor, navy suit, hair in that perfect bun, heels that added 3 inches to her height. Her makeup was flawless, hiding any trace of Friday night's disaster. But Evan could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful neutrality of her expression. Marcus? Evan. Her voice was crisp, professional. We have a staff meeting in 13 minutes. Don't be late. She walked past them toward her office, her pace measured, her posture rigid. Marcus whistled low. Ice Queen's in fine form today. Wonder if she even remembers Friday night. Evan stabbed the elevator button harder than necessary. Maybe people should spend less time gossiping and more time working. Whoa, easy there, just making conversation. Marcus stepped into the elevator when it arrived. You okay, man? You seem tense. I'm fine, just need coffee. The elevator doors closed on Marcus's skeptical expression, and Evan took the stairs instead, needing the physical exertion to burn off the anger simmering in his chest. By the time he reached the 4th floor, his heart was pounding, and his shirt was definitely too damp to pass as professional. He made it to his desk with 6 minutes to spare, powered up his computer, and tried not to watch Rachel's office door. The staff meeting was brutal in its normalcy. Rachel ran through quarterly projections, upcoming deadlines, and the new client pitches with mechanical precision. She made eye contact with everyone in the room at some point, including Evan, though her gaze skated past him no differently than it touched anyone else. Professional. Distant. Exactly what Monday morning had promised. Evan took notes he didn't need, contributed to discussions when called upon, and kept his expression neutral while his thoughts churned with everything unspoken between them. When the meeting ended, people filtered out in clusters, still buzzing about the anniversary party. Evan gathered his materials slowly, waiting for the room to clear, and found himself alone with Rachel for the first time since Saturday morning. She was organizing papers at the head of the table, movements precise and controlled. Rachel. Her hands stilled, but she didn't look up. Yes? Are we going to talk about it? About what? She straightened the papers into a perfect stack. You know what? Rachel finally met his eyes, and what he saw there made his chest ache, fear, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like pleading. Evan, I think it's best if we just move forward. What happened this weekend was an aberration. It doesn't need to define our working relationship. An aberration. He let the word hang there. A mistake on my part. One I deeply regret. She picked up the stack of papers. But it's done. And I'd appreciate it if we could simply return to normal. Normal. Evan stood, gathering his own materials. Right, because nothing says normal like your boss asking if you took advantage of her. Rachel flinched. That's not what I was asking. Wasn't it? He kept his voice low, conscious that the door was open and colleagues were passing in the hallway. Because that's sure what it felt like. Evan, please. Rachel's composure cracked slightly. I was terrified and confused, and I said something I shouldn't have. I've apologized. What else do you want from me? What did he want? Evan wasn't even sure himself. Recognition, maybe. Acknowledgement that what he'd done mattered. Some indication that she saw him as more than just the safe option. Nothing, he said finally. You're right. Let's just move forward. Relief flooded Rachel's face, followed quickly by something that might have been disappointment. Good. That's good. Evan walked to the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm glad you got home safe Friday night. I'm glad nothing happened that you'd regret. And I'm glad we can be professional about this. But, Rachel's voice was quiet. He turned back. But I wish you'd trusted me a little more from the start. He left before she could respond, before he could see whether his words had landed or simply rolled off that executive armor she wore so well. The rest of Monday crawled by with excruciating slowness. Evan buried himself in spreadsheets and project timelines, ate lunch at his desk, and avoided the break room where he could hear people still dissecting Friday night's drama. At 3:15 p.m., his desk phone rang. Rachel's extension. Evan Brooks. Could you come to my office, please? Rachel's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Be right there. He saved his work, grabbed a notepad for appearance's sake, and walked the 30 feet to her office with his heart doing something uncomfortable in his chest. Rachel's door was open. She was standing at her window, looking out at the rain that had intensified throughout the day. Close the door, please. Evan did, then waited. Rachel didn't turn from the window. I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about trust. Rachel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She finally turned to face him. Because you're right. I didn't trust you on Saturday morning. Not really. Not in the way you deserved after everything you'd done. Evan said nothing, just watched her gather her thoughts. My ex-husband had an affair, Rachel said abruptly, with his assistant. The cliché is almost painful, except that it destroyed 16 years of my life, so it doesn't feel particularly funny. She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture that made her look younger, more vulnerable. He told me it started at a company retreat. She'd had too much to drink, needed help getting back to her room, and her voice went hollow. He said it just happened. Understanding crashed over Evan like a wave. So when you woke up in a strange bed, I panicked. All I could think was that I'd become the other woman in someone else's story, that I'd been the one who'd had too much to drink, who'd needed help, Rachel's breath hitched. I was terrified that history had repeated itself, but this time I was the villain. Evan moved closer, not touching, just closing the distance. You're not a villain, Rachel. You needed help, and I helped you. That's it. But the question I asked was about your fear, not about who I am. I get that now. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry I made it about me this morning. That wasn't fair. Rachel shook her head. No, you had every right to be angry. I implied something terrible about your character without even considering. She stopped, started again. You gave up time with your daughter to make sure I was safe. You brought me to your home, put me in your child's bed, and treated me with nothing but respect and kindness, and I thanked you by assuming the worst. The silence that followed was different from the tense quiet of Saturday morning. This was the silence of two people finally understanding each other. Can we start over? Rachel asked. Not forget what happened, but maybe reframe it? How do you mean? She managed a small smile. I mean, instead of remembering Friday night as the worst mistake I've made in months, I'd like to remember it as the night I discovered I work with someone who has genuine integrity. Someone who showed up when he didn't have to. And Evan felt something loosen in his chest. I can work with that. Good. Rachel moved back to her desk, and just like that, the moment shifted back toward professional. Now, about the Henderson account. We're behind on the timeline, and I need your help getting us back on track. They spent the next hour working through project details, and if anyone had been watching, they would have seen nothing unusual, just a boss and her employee collaborating on work. But something had changed. In the way Rachel listened when Evan made suggestions, in the way she asked for his opinion instead of simply issuing directives, in the small smile that crossed her face when he made a joke about Marcus's terrible coffee. It wasn't much, but it was something. Evan left her office at 4:30 p.m. with a new project assignment and the strange feeling that the ground beneath his feet was less solid than it had been that morning. The week progressed in unexpected ways. Rachel started including Evan in meetings he'd normally be excluded from, asking for his input on strategy decisions that went beyond his usual scope. She stopped by his desk to ask questions that she could have easily emailed. She remembered details he'd mentioned in passing, that Mia had a dentist appointment on Wednesday, that his car was making a weird noise he needed to get checked. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that crossed professional boundaries. But personal in a way their interactions had never been before. On Thursday afternoon, Evan was reviewing budget projections when Rachel appeared at his desk. Do you have a minute? Sure, what's up? She glanced around the open office space, then back at him. Not here. My office? Evan followed her, curiosity building. Once the door was closed, Rachel pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. A little girl with dark hair and a gap-toothed smile, maybe 9 or 10 years old. This is Sophia, my niece. Rachel's voice was soft. Her birthday is Saturday. My sister's throwing a party, one of those elaborate princess things with a bounce house and a petting zoo. It's going to be chaos. Sounds fun, Evan said carefully, not sure where this was going. Sophia asked if she could invite some friends from her dance class. Her mom said yes before realizing that Sophia's dance class is the same one Mia's in. Evan's eyebrows shot up. Mia knows your niece? Apparently they're in the same age group, different competition teams, but they know each other. Rachel pocketed her phone. My sister extended an invitation to Mia and to you, if you'd like to come. No pressure. I know it's last minute, and you probably have plans. We don't have plans, Evan heard himself say. And Mia would love a party. Relief crossed Rachel's face. Really? You're sure? Yeah, just text me the details. Rachel smiled, and it was different from her professional smile or her polite smile or any of the dozen other smiles Evan had seen her deploy in meetings. This one reached her eyes. Thank you. Sophia will be thrilled, and my sister's been wanting to meet the man who... She stopped abruptly. She's been wanting to meet Mia's dad. Evan tilted his head. You told your sister about Friday night. It wasn't a question. I tell my sister everything, Rachel admitted. She's the only person who knows the whole story, and she's been on me all week about thanking you properly. You already thanked me. I know, but Sarah, my sister, she insisted that words aren't enough, hence the party invitation. Rachel leaned against her desk. Fair warning, she's going to interrogate you, subtly but thoroughly. I can handle interrogation, Evan said. I've survived toddler tantrums and first-grade parent-teacher conferences. How much worse can it be? Rachel laughed, genuine and surprised. You'd be amazed. When Evan got home that evening, Mia was already bouncing off the walls with excitement. Apparently, Sophia had told the entire dance class about her party during practice that afternoon. Daddy, Daddy, can I go? Please? Sophia's party is going to have ponies, real ponies, and a bounce house shaped like a castle. I already said yes, sweetheart. Mia launched herself at him with enough force to nearly knock him over. You're the best daddy ever. I need to make Sophia a card, and we need to get her a present. What do 9-year-olds like? Evan laughed, catching his daughter and spinning her around. We'll figure it out. Maybe we can go shopping tomorrow after I pick you up from school. Can I wear my recital dress? It's fancy enough for a princess party, right? It's perfect for a princess party. Mia chattered nonstop through dinner, bath time, and the entire bedtime routine. By the time Evan tucked her in, his ears were ringing, but his heart was light. Daddy? Mia's voice was sleepy but thoughtful. Is Miss Rachel going to be at the party? Evan paused in the doorway. Probably. It's her niece's birthday. Good. I liked her. She was sad when you helped her, but she was still nice to me. Mia yawned. I hope she's not sad anymore. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Friday at work passed in a blur of deadline-driven chaos. The Henderson account hit a snag that required all hands on deck, and Evan found himself working side by side with Rachel until nearly 7 p.m. This is useless, Rachel finally said, pushing back from the conference table. We're not going to solve this tonight. We're both exhausted and running in circles. Evan rubbed his eyes. You're right. Fresh eyes, Monday morning. They packed up in companionable silence, and Evan was surprised to find they were the last ones in the office. Can I ask you something? Rachel said as they waited for the elevator. Shoot. Do you ever resent it, being the reliable one? She met his eyes. The person everyone calls when they need help? Evan considered the question. Sometimes, especially when it feels like people only see that part of me. What parts don't they see? The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. They stepped inside and Evan hit the button for the parking garage. The parts that aren't safe or convenient. The parts that make mistakes or have bad days or want things they probably shouldn't want. He glanced at her. Why do you ask? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Because I think I've only been seeing the reliable part. And this week I've started to wonder what else I'm missing. The elevator reached the garage before Evan could formulate a response. They walked to their cars in silence, the fluorescent lights casting strange shadows. See you tomorrow, Rachel said. At the party. See you tomorrow. Evan drove home with her question echoing in his mind. What parts don't they see? And more importantly, did he want Rachel to see those parts? Or was it safer to remain exactly what everyone expected? Reliable, helpful, uncomplicated? Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the rain finally breaking. Mia insisted on wearing her recital dress despite Evan's warnings that she'd probably get it dirty at a party with a petting zoo. It's fine, Daddy. I'll be careful. Famous last words, Evan muttered, but he helped her with the zipper anyway. The party was at Rachel's sister's house in the suburbs, a sprawling colonial with a backyard that could accommodate the promised bounce house, petting zoo, and swarm of excited children. Evan parked on the street and grabbed the carefully wrapped present Mia had insisted on decorating herself. Ready? He asked his daughter. So ready. Mia practically vibrated with excitement. They made their way around to the backyard, following the sound of children's laughter and pop music. The party was in full swing. At least 20 kids running in various directions, parents clustered in conversational groups, and chaos that was somehow organized. Mia! Sophia spotted them immediately and came running. You came! Come see the ponies! Mia looked at Evan with pleading eyes. Go ahead. I'll find you later. The girls disappeared in a blur of tulle and giggles, and Evan was left standing alone with a wrapped present and no idea where to put it. You must be Evan. He turned to find a woman who looked like Rachel might look in 10 years. Same dark hair, same sharp eyes, but with smile lines carved deep and an ease in her posture that Rachel hadn't achieved yet. Sarah? He guessed. The one and only? She took the present from him with a grin. Rachel's told me a lot about you. Come on, I'll introduce you around and get you something to drink. Sarah led him through the party like a general commanding troops. making introductions, pointing out key landmarks, bathroom, food table, first aid kit, and generally making him feel welcome in a way that surprised him. "My sister's inside," Sarah said, handing him a beer. "She's been hiding from the chaos for the last 20 minutes, claims she's helping with the cake, but really she's just avoiding small talk with the other parents." "Sounds like Rachel," Evan said before he could stop himself. Sarah's eyes gleamed. "Oh, you do know her. Good. Most people only see the Ice Queen exterior." "I wouldn't call her that." "No, you wouldn't, which is exactly why my sister hasn't stopped talking about you all week." Sarah took a sip of her own drink. "She said you helped her when she needed it, that you went out of your way to make sure she was safe." "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Sarah said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have called a cab and washed their hands of the situation. You brought her to your home, took care of her, and asked for nothing in return. That's not common, Evan. That's exceptional." Evan didn't know what to say to that. "Rachel's had a rough year," Sarah continued, her voice softer now. "The divorce, the loneliness, trying to hold everything together at work while her personal life fell apart. She doesn't let people see her vulnerable. The fact that she let you help her, even drunk off her ass, says something." "Or it says I was convenient," Evan said. Sarah studied him with those sharp eyes that were so like her sister's. "You don't believe that." "I don't know what I believe." "Fair enough." Sarah clinked her beer against his. "Well, you're here now. Try to have fun. And if my sister finally emerges from the kitchen, maybe tell her she's allowed to enjoy herself. She's been wound so tight lately, I'm worried she'll snap." Sarah drifted away to handle some minor crisis involving the bounce house, and Evan found himself alone again, nursing his beer and watching Mia giggle with a group of girls by the petting zoo. "You look lost." Evan turned to find Rachel standing beside him, holding a glass of what looked like lemonade. She'd traded her usual work attire for jeans and a simple blue blouse, hair loose around her shoulders instead of in that severe bun. She looked younger, softer, more like the woman who'd cried in his kitchen than the executive who ran Monday morning meetings. "Just observing," Evan said. "Mia's in heaven." Sophia hasn't stopped talking about her all week. Apparently Mia's the cool kid in dance class. "Mia, cool?" Evan laughed. "She still sleeps with a stuffed elephant and cries during animated movies. So does Sophia. Don't tell her I told you." Rachel sipped her lemonade. "Thank you for coming. I know it's weird. Your boss's niece's birthday party." "It's not weird. Mia's having fun. That's what matters." They stood in companionable silence, watching the chaos unfold. A boy fell off the bounce house and got right back up. The ponies tolerated sticky-handed petting with remarkable patience. The birthday cake waited on a table under careful guard. "Can I tell you something?" Rachel said suddenly. "Sure." "I've been thinking about what you said Monday, about wishing I'd trusted you more from the start." She turned to face him. "I've spent so long protecting myself, building walls, making sure no one could hurt me again. And somewhere in there I forgot how to let people be good to me." Evan met her eyes. "You're allowed to protect yourself, Rachel. After what you went through." "I know, but there's a difference between protecting yourself and assuming everyone's going to hurt you." She set down her lemonade. "You didn't hurt me, Evan. You helped me, and I need to do better at recognizing the difference." "We're good," Evan said. "I promise." "Are we?" Rachel's voice was quiet. "Because it feels like something changed last weekend. Something I can't quite name." Before Evan could respond, Sophia's voice rang out across the yard. "Aunt Rachel, it's cake time!" Rachel grimaced. "Duty calls, but later, can we talk? Really talk?" "Yeah," Evan said. "We can talk." He watched her walk away, watched her transform from the woman having a vulnerable conversation to the aunt helping wrangle 20 excited children for cake and presents. She was good at it, he realized, good at putting people at ease and making them feel seen. She'd just forgotten how to let others do the same for her. The party wound down as afternoon stretched into early evening. Parents collected sugar-crashed children, thanked Sarah profusely, and disappeared in minivans loaded with party favors. Mia helped Sophia open presents with the intense focus of someone taking mental notes for her own future birthday. Evan helped Sarah break down tables and haul trash bags to the curb, grateful for something to do with his hands. "You're good at this," Sarah observed, tying off a bag. Trash duty? Being present. Not a lot of people know how to just exist in a space without making it about themselves. Evan shrugged. Comes with the single-parent territory. You learn to adapt. Rachel said your wife passed. I'm sorry. Thank you. Can I ask you something? Sarah didn't wait for permission. Do you still wear your ring? Evan glanced at his left hand, at the simple gold band he'd never taken off. Yeah. Why? It wasn't asked unkindly, just curiously. Because I'm still married to her memory, Evan said quietly. Because taking it off feels like erasing her, and because... He stopped, surprised by the honesty wanting to spill out. Because? Sarah prompted. Because if I take it off, I have to admit I'm ready to move on, and I don't know if I am. Sarah nodded slowly. That's fair. Just know that wearing a ring doesn't protect you from life happening anyway. Before Evan could ask what she meant, Mia appeared at his elbow, exhausted and happy. Daddy, can Sophia come to our house sometime? We want to practice our routine together. We'll see, sweetheart. Say thank you to Mrs. Chen for having us. The goodbyes took another 20 minutes, complicated by Mia's newfound friendship with Sophia and both girls' resistance to being separated. Finally, Evan managed to extract his daughter and carry her toward the car. Wait, Rachel caught up to them on the sidewalk, slightly out of breath. I'm glad you came, she said. Both of you. Thanks for inviting us. Evan shifted Mia's weight. She was already half asleep on his shoulder. Rachel reached out like she might touch his arm, then thought better of it. That talk I mentioned, Monday? Evan suggested. After work? Monday, Rachel agreed. After work. Evan carried Mia to the car, buckled her in, and drove home with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. His daughter slept the whole way, exhausted from excitement and sugar. As he carried her inside and tucked her into bed still in her recital dress, Evan thought about wedding rings and moving on and the way Rachel had looked standing in her sister's yard with the late afternoon sun catching the highlights in her hair. He thought about conversations that hadn't happened yet and the strange intimacy of helping someone at their most vulnerable. He thought about being safe, being reliable, being exactly what people expected. And for the first time in 3 years, he wondered what might happen if he let himself be something else. Monday arrived with an urgency that had nothing to do with work deadlines and everything to do with the conversation hanging between them like a held breath. Evan dropped Mia at school, drove to the office on autopilot, and found himself sitting in the parking lot 5 minutes before 8, staring at the building entrance and trying to remember how to be normal. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Running late. Started the coffee already. Help yourself. He smiled despite his nerves. She'd remembered he always needed coffee before the staff meeting. The morning unfolded in predictable patterns. Projects were discussed, deadlines were negotiated. Marcus complained about the Henderson account for the 3rd time that week. Through it all, Evan felt Rachel's awareness of him like a physical thing. The way her eyes found his across the conference room, the subtle shift in her posture when he spoke. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. She hasn't stopped talking about you all week. At 11:30 a.m., his desk phone rang. Evan Brooks? Lunch? Rachel's voice was casual, but he heard the tension underneath. There's a sandwich place 2 blocks over. We could actually talk without the entire office listening. Give me 5 minutes. They walked to the restaurant in silence, the autumn air crisp enough to warrant jackets. Rachel had her hands shoved in her pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the wind. I've been rehearsing this conversation all weekend, she said finally. And now that we're actually doing it, I have no idea where to start. Start anywhere, Evan said. I'm not going anywhere. They found a corner booth away from the lunch rush crowd. Rachel ordered a salad she barely touched. Evan got a sandwich he had no appetite for. For a long moment, they just sat there, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on the table between them. I told my therapist about Friday night, Rachel said abruptly. Evan's eyebrows rose. You have a therapist? Started seeing one after the divorce. Best decision I've made in years. She pushed lettuce around her plate. I told her about the party, about waking up in your house, about the question I asked you, about how you responded. What did she say? She asked me why I was so terrified of the answer. Rachel finally looked up. And when I told her about my ex, about the affair, about how it started, she asked me something I wasn't expecting. Evan waited. She asked if I was more afraid that something had happened between us, or more afraid that nothing had. Rachel's voice dropped. I didn't have an answer. The restaurant noise faded to background static. Evan's sandwich sat forgotten on his plate. What does that mean? He asked quietly. I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Rachel set down her fork with deliberate care. For 2 years, you've been the guy who shows up early, stays late, never complains. Professional, competent, safe. There was that word again. Safe. But this weekend, at Sophia's party, Sarah said something that's been stuck in my head. She said you were good at being present, at existing in a space without making it about yourself. Rachel's hands twisted together. And I realized I've never actually seen you, Evan. Not really. I've seen the employee, the single dad, the reliable guy. But I haven't seen you. Rachel, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. When I woke up Saturday morning and asked you that question, I was expecting you to be angry, to tell me off, to make me feel like garbage for even suggesting it. But you didn't. You told me the truth. You were hurt by the implication, and then you still treated me with kindness. You were vulnerable. Of course Most people wouldn't have, Rachel cut in. Most people would have held it over me, or made me feel worse than I already did, or used it as leverage somehow. But you just helped me understand why I'd asked. You made room for my fear without letting it define you. Evan didn't know what to say to that. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, Rachel continued. About the way you looked when you said you wished I'd trusted you more. About how you sacrificed your evening with Mia to make sure I was safe. About the fact that you brought me to your home, to your daughter's room, and never once made me feel like I owed you anything. You didn't owe me anything. You still don't. I know. That's my point. Rachel's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. You gave me dignity when I didn't deserve it, and I can't figure out if that's just who you are or if there's something more happening here. The question hung between them, raw and honest. Evan reached for his water glass, needed something to ground him. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. Rachel leaned forward. When you brought me to your house that night, when you sat with me while I fell asleep, when you checked on me in the middle of the night, was it just because it was the right thing to do, or was there another reason? Evan's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the moment. The inflection point where he could retreat back to safe, reliable Evan, or he could tell her the truth that had been building since she'd asked him that terrible question in his kitchen. Both, he said finally. It was the right thing to do. But if it had been anyone else from the office, I probably would have just called them a cab and made sure they got in it safely. I wouldn't have brought them home. Why me? Because you were crying. The words came easier now. Because you sounded so lost and scared, and something in me couldn't stand the thought of you being alone like that. Because he stopped, recalibrated. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my boss. Rachel's breath caught. What am I then? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She smiled, small and uncertain. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both trying to figure out something neither of us can name. Yeah. Evan found himself smiling back. Yeah, we are. They finished lunch talking about safer things. Mia's upcoming school project, Sophia's tendency to boss around the other kids in dance class, the Henderson account that was slowly driving them both insane. But underneath the casual conversation was a new awareness, an acknowledgement that something had shifted between them and there was no going back to before. When they returned to the office, Marcus was waiting at Evan's desk with a stack of files and a knowing grin. Long lunch with the boss, huh? Should I be worried about favoritism? Evan took the files without responding. Come on, man. You disappear for 90 minutes with Monroe and come back looking like you just had a religious experience. What's going on? We had lunch and talked about work. That's it. Marcus's grin widened. Right, work, because that's definitely the look of someone who discussed quarterly projections. Don't you have actual work to do? Evan snapped, patience wearing thin. Whoa, touchy. Marcus held up his hands. Just making conversation. After Marcus left, Evan tried to focus on the files in front of him, but the words blurred together. His mind kept circling back to Rachel's question. Was there another reason? And his answer. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my boss. He hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even fully admitted it to himself until the words were out. But they were true. Somewhere between professional respect and personal crisis, between Monday morning meetings and Saturday morning confessions, Rachel Monroe had become someone who mattered in a way that went beyond organizational charts and job descriptions. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like finally naming something that had been there all along, waiting to be acknowledged. His phone buzzed. Another text from Rachel. Thank you for lunch, for being honest, for being you. Evan stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, thank you for asking the questions nobody else would. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, dinner sometime? Not as boss and employee, just as 2 people trying to figure things out. Evan's thumb hovered over the keyboard. This was it. The moment where he either stepped forward into something new and potentially complicated, or stepped back into the safety of professional boundaries. He thought about his wedding ring, about Sarah's observation that wearing it didn't protect him from life happening anyway. He thought about Mia asking if Miss Rachel was still sad. He thought about being seen as safe, as reliable, as nothing more or less than expected. He typed, I'd like that. When? Saturday? I can come to you. I know you have Mia. Saturday works. I'll cook. You cook? Don't sound so surprised. I'm full of hidden talents. I'm starting to realize that. Evan pocketed his phone and tried to return to work, but concentration was impossible. Saturday felt both impossibly far away and dangerously close. That evening, after Mia was asleep and the dinner dishes were done, Evan found himself standing at his bedroom window, twisting his wedding ring around his finger. Sarah's photo sat on the nightstand where it had lived for 3 years, her smile frozen in time. Forever young, forever his. I don't know what I'm doing, he said quietly to the photo. I know you'd probably tell me to live my life, to be happy, to not feel guilty about moving forward. But it's hard, Sarah. It's so damn hard. The photo didn't answer, of course. But in the silence, Evan felt something release in his chest. Not permission exactly, but perhaps acceptance. Sarah was gone. Mia needed a father who was present, not one trapped in grief. And Evan needed to figure out who he was beyond widower, beyond single dad, beyond safe. He slipped the ring off his finger for the first time in 3 years. It felt wrong. His hand felt naked, incomplete. He put the ring back on immediately, but the point had been made. He could take it off. The world wouldn't end. Sarah's memory wouldn't disappear. He just wasn't ready yet. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Work was busy enough to be distracting, but not engaging enough to fully occupy his mind. Rachel maintained professional distance in meetings, but found reasons to stop by his desk. Quick questions about projects, casual comments about weekend plans. Nothing that would raise eyebrows, but everything that made Evan hyper-aware of her presence. On Thursday, Mia announced over dinner that Sophia had invited her for a sleepover Saturday night. Can I go, Daddy, please? Sophia's mom said it's okay and we're going to watch movies and make friendship bracelets and stay up really late. Evan's heart stuttered. Saturday night. The night Rachel was supposed to come for dinner. Let me talk to Sophia's mom first, he said carefully. Make sure it's really okay. Mia bounced in her seat. It is. Mrs. Chen called while you were at work. I answered the phone like you taught me. She wants to talk to you, but she said it's definitely okay. That evening, after Mia was in bed, Evan called Sarah. The sleepover's legit, Sarah confirmed. Sophia's been asking for weeks. I figured you and Rachel could use some time without a 7-year-old running interference. Did Rachel put you up to this? Sarah laughed. My sister doesn't have the nerve to orchestrate a sleepover, Evan. She's terrified enough about dinner. This is pure coincidence, or fate, if you believe in that sort of thing. I'm not sure what I believe in anymore. Well, believe in this. My sister hasn't been this nervous about a date since high school. Whatever's happening between you two, it matters to her. It's not a date, Evan protested. It's dinner, between friends, or colleagues, or... It's a date, Evan. Own it. After hanging up, Evan texted Rachel. Mia has a sleepover Saturday night. We'll have the place to ourselves. Her response came quickly. Is that going to make things weird? Probably. Still want to come? Definitely. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect fall weather that belonged in movies. Crisp air, golden light, leaves crunching underfoot. Evan dropped Mia at Sarah's house mid-afternoon, endured his daughter's excited chatter about all the fun she was going to have, and drove home to a house that felt too quiet. He'd planned to cook something impressive, but his nerves got the better of him. He settled on pasta, something he could make well without overthinking it, and tried not to obsess over whether his house was clean enough, whether he should have ordered takeout instead, whether this whole thing was a terrible idea. Rachel arrived at 6:30 p.m. carrying a bottle of wine and wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look like someone's cool older sister instead of a corporate executive. I know I said I'd cook, but I brought wine anyway, she said, handing him the bottle. Figured we could both use it. You figured right. She followed him into the kitchen, took in the pasta ingredients laid out on the counter, and smiled. You really do cook. Told you I was full of hidden talents. What else are you hiding? The question was light, teasing, but it carried weight. Evan set the wine bottle on the counter, met her eyes. Guess you'll have to stick around to find out. They cooked together, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Rachel chopped vegetables while Evan handled the pasta. They talked about nothing important, favorite foods, worst cooking disasters, the time Mia tried to make breakfast in bed and nearly set the kitchen on fire. It felt normal. Comfortable, like they'd done this 100 times before. Can I ask you something? Rachel said as Evan stirred the sauce. You've been asking me things all week. Why stop now? She laughed. Fair point. Okay, here goes. Why did you agree to this? To dinner? To whatever this is we're doing? Evan considered his answer carefully. Because you asked. Because I wanted to. Because I'm tired of being just the safe option. Rachel set down her knife. You were never just the safe option, Evan. Not to me. What was I then? The guy who made me feel seen when I'd forgotten what that felt like. She moved closer. The guy who showed up when nobody else would. The guy who... She stopped, started again. You're the first person in a long time who's looked at me and seen Rachel instead of Ms. Monroe. They're not the same person? Not even close. She picked up her wine glass. Miss Monroe is competent and professional and has everything under control. Rachel is a mess who cries in her car and drinks too much at company parties and doesn't know how to ask for help. I like Rachel better, Evan said quietly. Yeah? Her voice was uncertain. Yeah, she's more interesting. They ate dinner at his small kitchen table, the same table where Rachel had stood days ago asking if they'd slept together. But tonight, the space between them felt different, charged with possibility instead of fear. Tell me about your wife, Rachel said over dessert. If that's okay to ask. Evan twisted his wedding ring, the gesture automatic. Sarah was my high school sweetheart. Everyone said we were too young to know what we wanted, but we did. Got married at 22, had Mia at 25. She was a teacher, second grade. Loved her students like they were her own kids. She sounds wonderful. She was. She was also stubborn and competitive and had a terrible singing voice that she insisted on using anyway. Evan smiled at the memory. She made me laugh every single day. Even at the end, when she could barely stay awake, she'd crack jokes that were completely inappropriate. You still love her, Rachel observed. Not an accusation, just a statement. I'll always love her. She's Mia's mom. She was my best friend. Evan looked down at his ring. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and I don't know how to reconcile those things. Rachel reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. You don't have to reconcile them tonight, or ever, really. You just have to figure out what you want now. What if I don't know what I want? Then we figure it out together. She pulled her hand back, giving him space. No pressure, no expectations, just two people seeing what happens. They moved to the living room after dinner, settling on opposite ends of the couch with fresh glasses of wine. Outside, the sun had set completely, leaving the house wrapped in comfortable darkness broken only by the lamp in the corner. Can I tell you what scares me most about this? Rachel asked. About what? About whatever's happening between us. She pulled her knees up to her chest. I'm your boss, Evan. If this goes wrong, you could lose your job. I could lose my credibility. We could both end up regretting every choice we're making right now. Is that what you think will happen? I don't know, but I'm terrified of finding out. She met his eyes across the couch. My marriage ended because my ex couldn't keep professional and personal separate. And here I am, potentially making the same mistake. This isn't the same thing, Evan said firmly. Your ex cheated on you. What's happening here? This is honest. We're being honest with each other. Honest about what exactly? We haven't even named what this is. Evan set down his wine glass, turned to face her fully. You want me to name it? Fine. I think about you when I'm supposed to be working. I notice when you change your coffee order. I look for excuses to stop by your office even when I don't need anything. And when you asked me to dinner, I said yes before I even thought about whether it was a good idea. Rachel's breath caught. Evan, I'm not done. You scare me, Rachel. Not because you're my boss, but because you're the first person since Sarah who's made me want something for myself instead of just for Mia. And I have no idea what to do with that. The silence that followed was thick with everything unsaid. I think about you too, Rachel finally whispered. I think about the way you looked standing in your kitchen telling me nothing happened. I think about how you didn't have to help me, but you did anyway. I think about... Her voice cracked. I think about what it might feel like to be seen by someone like you. Like me? Someone genuine. Someone who doesn't want anything from me except honesty. Evan moved closer, closing the distance between them on the couch. So what do we do about it? I don't know. I've never done this before. Caught feelings for someone I work with. Caught feelings? Despite everything, Evan smiled. Is that what we're calling this? Rachel laughed, the sound shaky but real. What would you call it? Terrifying, complicated, potentially catastrophic. He reached out, let his fingers brush against hers. And also kind of amazing. She turned her hand over, lacing their fingers together. We'd have to be careful. At work, I mean. We couldn't let anyone know, not yet. Not until we figure out what this even is. I can be careful. Can you? Because you're terrible at hiding your feelings, Evan. Every time you look at me, I can see exactly what you're thinking. What am I thinking right now? Rachel studied his face, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. You're thinking about kissing me. And you're thinking about all the reasons you shouldn't. And you're trying to figure out which impulse is going to win. You read minds now? I read you. She squeezed his hand. The question is, which impulse is going to win? Evan looked at their joined hands, at the wedding ring still circling his finger, at Rachel's face lit by lamplight and open in a way he'd never seen before. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to kiss you so badly it's hard to breathe, and part of me feels like I'd be betraying Sarah if I did. Your wife has been gone for 3 years, Rachel said gently. You're allowed to move forward. Am I? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like if I take this step, if I let myself want you, I'm admitting she's really gone, and I'm not ready for that. Rachel nodded slowly. Okay, then we don't kiss. Not tonight. Not until you're ready. That could be a while. I'm patient. She smiled. I waited 16 years for my marriage to end. I can wait for you to figure out what you want. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, the space between them charged with potential and restraint. Eventually, Rachel's head found its way to his shoulder, and Evan let himself relax into the contact. This is nice, Rachel murmured. Yeah, it is. Evan? Thank you for being honest with me, about Sarah, about being scared, about all of it. Thank you for asking, for caring enough to want to know. Outside, a car drove past, headlights sweeping across the living room. The moment stretched, comfortable and terrifying in equal measure. I should probably go, Rachel said eventually, though she made no move to actually leave. It's getting late. You could stay? The words were out before Evan could stop them. Not like, just to talk more, or watch a movie, or whatever. Rachel lifted her head from his shoulder, studied his face. Are you sure? No, but I want you to anyway. She smiled, settled back against him. Okay, then I'll stay. They talked until nearly midnight about Mia's upcoming school project, about Rachel's failed attempts at learning to play guitar, about the ways their lives had diverged and somehow found their way back to this moment. When Rachel finally did leave, Evan walked her to her car, hands shoved in his pockets against the autumn chill. Tonight was, Rachel started. Yeah, Evan agreed. It really was. She laughed. We didn't even finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Rachel opened her car door, then turned back. Monday's going to be weird, isn't it? Probably. We'll manage. How? Same way we've been managing all week. Carefully, professionally, pretending we're not counting the hours until we can do this again. Is that what you're doing? Counting hours? From the moment you leave my driveway. Rachel's smile could have lit the entire street. Me too. She drove away and Evan stood in his driveway long after her taillights disappeared, feeling the ghost of her hand in his and wondering what the hell he was doing. Inside, the house felt different, less empty, like Rachel had left something of herself behind in the spaces between furniture and conversation. Evan picked up his phone, sent a text before he could overthink it. Made it home safe? Just pulled into my driveway. Thank you for tonight. For everything. Thank you for staying. Anytime. Literally, anytime. Evan smiled at his phone like a teenager, then forced himself to put it away. He cleaned up the dinner dishes, straightened the living room, and found himself standing in front of Sarah's photo again. I'm trying, he told the image. I'm trying to figure out how to do this without feeling like I'm leaving you behind. The photo smiled back, frozen and perfect and gone. Evan touched his wedding ring one more time, then turned off the lights and went to bed. Sleep came easier than expected, and when he dreamed, it was of Rachel's laugh and joined hands and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of something new. Sunday morning brought Mia home full of stories about the sleepover, about movies watched and secrets shared and friendship bracelets exchanged. She chattered through breakfast, through getting ready for the park, through the entire walk to the playground where she immediately found Sophia and ran off without a backward glance. Evan settled onto a bench, phone in hand, trying not to obsessively check for messages from Rachel. He'd sent her a good morning text 2 hours ago and received nothing back. Maybe she was having second thoughts. Maybe last night had been a mistake she was already trying to figure out how to undo. You look like a man with something on his mind. Sarah dropped onto the bench beside him, coffee in hand despite the fact that her daughter was currently scaling the monkey bars with reckless abandon. Shouldn't you be watching Sophia? Evan asked. She's fine. You're more interesting. Sarah took a sip of coffee. So, how was dinner? Rachel told you about it? She called me at midnight, practically vibrating through the phone, said you two talked for hours and she didn't want to leave. Sarah's eyes sparkled. Care to elaborate? Evan watched Mia and Sophia take turns on the swings, their laughter carrying across the playground. We talked. About a lot of things. About what's happening between us, about being scared, about not knowing what to call this. And? And nothing. We held hands. She put her head on my shoulder. I asked her to stay, and she did. Then she went home. Sarah studied him. You didn't kiss her. It wasn't a question. No. But you wanted to. Yeah, I wanted to. So what stopped you? Evan looked down at his wedding ring, the metal worn smooth from 3 years of constant wear. Sarah did. My Sarah. The one who's not here anymore but somehow still is. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you something my sister probably wouldn't want you to know? Should you? Probably not, but I'm going to anyway. She set down her coffee. Rachel hasn't dated anyone since her divorce was finalized, not even casual coffee dates. She told me she was done with men, done with relationships, done with the whole mess of trying to trust someone again. Evan felt something tighten in his chest. Then she met you. Or rather, she already knew you, but she saw you differently after that night. And suddenly she was calling me 3 times a week, asking questions she'd never asked before. How do you know if someone's genuinely good or just good at performing goodness? How do you let someone in without losing yourself? How do you trust your judgment when your judgment has been so catastrophically wrong before? What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes you just have to take the leap and see if someone catches you. Sarah turned to face him directly. She's terrified, Evan, but she's also falling for you. Hard. And I think you're falling for her too, except you're holding yourself back because you think moving forward means leaving your wife behind. Doesn't it? No, it means making room for both, for who you were with Sarah and who you could be with Rachel. They're not mutually exclusive. Evan's phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. Sorry for the radio silence. Spent the morning overthinking everything. Are you free to talk? He showed Sarah the message. Go, she said. I'll watch Mia. Take your time. Evan walked to the far end of the park, found a quiet spot under an oak tree, and called Rachel. She answered on the first ring. Hi. Hi yourself. You okay? Honestly, I don't know. He heard rustling like she was settling into a chair. I woke up this morning convinced that last night was a mistake, that we crossed a line we shouldn't have crossed, that I was being reckless and stupid and setting myself up to get hurt again. Evan's stomach dropped. And now? Now I'm still convinced of all those things, but I also can't stop thinking about the way it felt to just sit with you, to talk without performing, to be seen without being judged. Her voice softened. I haven't felt that in so long, Evan, and it scares me how much I want more of it. I'm scared too, Evan admitted. I'm terrified that if I let myself fall for you, I'll lose the last connection I have to Sarah, that Mia will think I'm replacing her mother, that I'm betraying everything we built together. Are those rational fears or just fears? Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Because rational fears we can address. Regular fears we just have to feel through. Rachel paused. My therapist told me something last week that's been stuck in my head. She said fear is just love looking for a safe place to land. Evan leaned against the tree trunk, watched Mia spin in circles with Sophia, dizzy and delighted. What does that mean? It means I'm scared because I'm starting to care about you, because the possibility of this going wrong actually matters. And it means you're scared because loving someone new feels like a betrayal of the love you already had. Rachel's breath hitched. But here's the thing. Your capacity to love didn't die with your wife. You're allowed to love again, Evan. Your heart is big enough for both. How do you know? Because I see how you love Mia, how you show up for her every single day, how you sacrifice your own wants for her needs, how you carry your grief quietly so she doesn't have to carry it too. That kind of love doesn't diminish other love. It expands it. Evan felt his throat tighten. Rachel, I'm not asking you to choose between your past and whatever this is between us. I would never ask that. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe you can honor both, that loving again doesn't erase what came before. And if I can't figure out how to do that, then we stay friends, we stay colleagues, we stay whatever you need us to be. Her voice was steady despite the emotion underneath. But I need you to know that I'm willing to wait while you figure it out. Not forever. I'm not a saint, but long enough for you to make a real choice instead of running from fear. Across the playground, Mia waved at him, her smile brilliant in the autumn sunlight. Evan waved back, his heart pulling in two directions at once. Can I ask you something? He said. Always. If this works, if we figure out how to navigate the work thing and the fear thing and all the complicated things, what does that even look like? Where do we go from here? Rachel laughed softly. I have no idea. I've never done this before, but I think maybe that's okay. Maybe not knowing is part of it. You're surprisingly zen about uncertainty for someone who runs quarterly projections for a living. I'm faking it. Inside, I'm completely panicking. That makes two of us. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important, about Sophia's sleepover chaos, about the leaves changing colors, about the coffee shop Rachel had discovered that made the best lattes in the city. By the time they hung up, Evan felt steadier, like naming the fear had somehow made it more manageable. Sarah was waiting when he returned to the bench, her expression knowing. Better? She asked. Maybe. I don't know. Evan sat down heavily. She said loving again doesn't erase what came before, that my heart is big enough for both. She's right. Is she? Because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm cheating on a ghost. Sarah turned to face him fully. Can I tell you something hard? Do I have a choice? Not really. She took a breath. Your wife is dead, Evan. She's been dead for 3 years. And I know that sounds harsh, but you need to hear it. She's not coming back. She's not waiting for you to stay faithful to her memory. She's gone. Evan flinched. But here's what else is true. The love you had for her? That's not gone. That's living in Mia's smile and in the way you show up for people and in the kindness you showed my sister when she needed it most. Your wife's love made you into someone worth knowing, and now you get to choose what to do with that. What if I choose wrong? Then you'll survive it, just like you survived losing her. Sarah's voice gentled. You're not betraying Sarah by moving forward, Evan. You're honoring her by living the life she would have wanted you to have. A life with love in it. A life with possibility. Mia ran over, breathless and grass-stained. Daddy, can we get ice cream? Sophia's mom said she'd take us if you say yes. Evan looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at Sarah's knowing expression, at the ordinary Sunday unfolding around them. Yeah, sweetheart, ice cream sounds perfect. That evening, after ice cream and playground exhaustion and Mia's 100th retelling of sleepover adventures, Evan stood in his bedroom staring at his wedding ring. He'd been twisting it unconsciously all day, the familiar weight both comfort and constraint. He pulled it off slowly, held it in his palm. The indent on his finger was pale, a ghost of constant wear. I'm not leaving you behind, what? He said to Sarah's photo. I'm just making room for something new. He placed the ring in the small wooden box on his dresser, the one that held Sarah's wedding ring and a few other precious pieces of their life together. It felt monumental and terrifying and also strangely right. His hand felt naked without it, empty, but also free. Monday morning arrived with the particular anxiety of secrets. Evan walked into the office, hyper-aware of every glance, every interaction, convinced that everyone could somehow see what had shifted between him and Rachel. But nobody noticed. Marcus complained about his weekend. The coffee maker was broken again. Rachel ran the staff meeting with her usual crisp efficiency, and when her eyes landed on Evan, there was nothing there that anyone else would recognize as different. Except Evan recognized it. The slight softening at the corners of her mouth, the way she held his gaze half a second longer than necessary, the warmth underneath the professionalism. After the meeting, he found a sticky note on his keyboard. Lunch? They met at the same sandwich place, found the same corner booth. But this time, when Rachel's hand brushed his across the table, he didn't pull away. You're not wearing your ring, she observed quietly. Evan looked down at his bare finger. No, I'm not. When did you take it off? Last night, after talking to Sarah, my sister-in-law, not my wife. She said some things I needed to hear. Like what? Like I'm allowed to move forward. Like loving you doesn't erase what I had with Sarah. He met Rachel's eyes. Like I'm carrying grief that doesn't belong to me anymore. Rachel's breath caught. Loving me? Potentially loving you. Starting to maybe have feelings that could turn into love if I let them. Evan smiled despite his nerves. I'm trying to be careful with words here. Don't be. I like the uncareful version better. She laced her fingers through his. For what it's worth, I'm potentially starting to maybe have those same feelings. Yeah? Yeah. Terrifying, right? Absolutely terrifying. They ate lunch holding hands under the table like teenagers, talking about everything except the elephant in the room, how to navigate a relationship when one of them was the other's boss. Finally, Rachel brought it up. We need to talk about the work thing. I know. If this becomes real, if we actually do this, we have to be smart about it. HR has policies. So does my employment contract. She squeezed his hand. I could lose my job if the board thinks I'm showing favoritism. You could lose yours if it looks like you're sleeping your way up the ladder. So what do? We're careful. We keep work and personal completely separate. No preferential treatment, no public displays, nothing that could give anyone ammunition against us. Rachel's jaw tightened, and eventually, if this goes where I think it might go, one of us has to leave the company. The words landed like a punch. You'd leave? Evan asked. Or you would? We'd figure it out together when the time comes. She met his eyes. But right now we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we just see if this actually works outside of charged conversations and hand-holding. How do we do that? Rachel pulled out her phone, checked her calendar. Friday night, real date. Not at your house, not at mine. Somewhere neutral where we can be ourselves without the weight of everything else. What about Mia? What about her? You have a sister who babysits, right? Yeah, but what? You're allowed to have a life, Evan. You're allowed to go on dates. He thought about that, about the last time he'd been on an actual date, probably 6 months before Sarah got sick, some forgettable dinner at an Italian restaurant. The idea of dating again felt foreign, like trying on clothes that used to fit but no longer matched who he'd become. Okay, he said finally. Friday night, real date. Rachel's smile was brilliant. Pick me up at 7? It's a date, literally. The rest of the week moved in strange rhythms, professional distance at work, increasingly personal text conversations in the evenings, phone calls after Mia was asleep that stretched until midnight. They were learning each other in pieces, trading stories and secrets, and the small mundane details that built intimacy. Evan learned that Rachel sang off-key in the shower and had a weakness for terrible reality TV, that she'd wanted to be an architect but chose business school because it seemed more practical, that her divorce had shattered something in her that was only now beginning to heal. Rachel learned that Evan had played guitar in college and still kept one in his closet, that he cried during animated movies but never admitted it, that the first year after Sarah died he'd barely functioned, moving through days on autopilot while his sister basically raised Mia. They learned each other's rhythms, their patterns, the spaces between words where meaning lived. By Friday, Evan was a mess of nerves. He'd arranged for his sister to watch Mia, picked out an outfit 3 times before settling on something casual but nice, and arrived at Rachel's apartment building 10 minutes early because he couldn't stand waiting at home anymore. She lived in a sleek downtown building with a doorman who eyed Evan suspiciously until Rachel came down to meet him. She wore a dark green dress that brought out the color of her eyes, hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual bun. She looked nervous and beautiful, and nothing like the woman who ran Monday morning meetings. "Hi," she said. "Hi. You look amazing. You clean up pretty well yourself." She locked her arm through his. "So where are we going?" "That new Italian place on 5th. I made reservations. Fancy. Only the best for potentially maybe falling in love with someone." Rachel laughed, and the sound dissolved some of Evan's nervousness. This was Rachel, the woman who'd cried in his car and held his daughter's recital trophy and asked him the hardest questions. He knew her. This would be okay. The restaurant was intimate without being pretentious, candlelit without being cliché. They ordered wine and pasta and fell into conversation that flowed easier than it had any right to. "Tell me something nobody else knows about you," Rachel said over appetizers. "Like what?" "Anything. A secret, a dream, something you've never told anyone." Evan considered. "I wanted to be a teacher. Like Sarah. I was actually enrolled in the education program in college before I switched to business." "Why did you switch?" "Because teaching didn't pay enough to support a family. Because I thought I needed to be practical." He took a sip of wine. "I've always wondered what my life would have looked like if I'd stuck with it." "Would you have been happier?" "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Rachel reached across the table, traced her finger along his knuckles. "I think you would have been an amazing teacher. You're patient and kind, and you actually listen when people talk. That's rare. Your turn. Tell me something nobody knows." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I loved my ex-husband. Not really. I think I loved the idea of him, the stability, the partnership, the future we were building. But the actual person." She shook her head. "I'm not sure I ever knew him well enough to love him." That's heartbreaking. It's honest, and maybe that's why the divorce hurt less than it should have. Because I wasn't losing someone I loved. I was losing the illusion of what I thought love was supposed to look like. Evan turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. "What do you think love is supposed to look like now?" "This." She gestured between them. "Conversations that matter. Honesty that scares you. Someone who sees you, really sees you, and doesn't run away." "I'm not running." I know, that's what terrifies me. They finished dinner talking about lighter things: favorite books, worst vacations, the complete disaster that was Evan's attempt to teach Mia to ride a bike. By the time dessert arrived, they were both more relaxed, the nervous energy settling into something warmer. Can I ask you something? Evan said as they shared tiramisu. Haven't you been asking me things all night? One more. A big one. Rachel set down her fork. Okay. Ask. What happens if this doesn't work? If we try and it falls apart and we're left with nothing but awkwardness and regret? She didn't answer immediately, just looked at him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Then we'll survive it, she said finally. We'll be professionals. We'll be adults. We'll figure out how to work together without making it weird. She paused. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. No? No. I think we're going to be terrified and messy and completely out of our depth. I think we're going to make mistakes and have fights and have moments where we question everything. But I also think, her voice caught, I think this might be real. And I think real is worth the risk. Evan felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening after years of being locked. I think so too, he said quietly. They left the restaurant and walked through downtown, the October air crisp enough to warrant Rachel moving closer, her arm linked through his. They didn't talk much, just walked and existed in the same space, comfortable in silence. I don't want this night to end, Rachel said as they approached her building. It doesn't have to, not yet. They sat on a bench in the small park across from her apartment, watching late-night pedestrians pass, the city alive around them. Evan had his arm around her shoulders. Rachel had her head against his chest. It felt natural, inevitable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. Evan? Yeah? Can I kiss you, or is that still too much? His heart hammered. I don't know. Maybe we should find out. Rachel lifted her head, met his eyes. Are you sure? No, but I want to anyway. She leaned in slowly, giving him time to pull away if he needed to. But Evan didn't pull away. He met her halfway, and when their lips touched, everything else fell away. The kiss was gentle, tentative, asking questions neither of them could answer yet. It tasted like wine and tiramisu and the particular courage of taking leaps without knowing where you'll land. When they pulled apart, Rachel was smiling. Okay? Yeah. Evan touched his forehead to hers. More than okay. Good, because I'd really like to do that again. Now? Eventually. But first I want to just sit here with you and remember what this feels like. So they sat, wrapped in each other in October air, while the city moved around them and the future stretched out uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. When Evan finally drove home an hour later, his lips still tingling from Rachel's kisses, he felt lighter than he had in 3 years, like he'd been carrying weight he didn't realize was there until he finally set it down. At home, after paying his sister and checking on Mia, he stood in front of Sarah's photo one more time. I kissed someone tonight, he said quietly. Someone who makes me want to be brave. Someone who sees me and doesn't look away. He touched the frame gently. I hope wherever you are, you're okay with that, because I think I'm falling for her. And I think that's okay. The photo smiled back, frozen and perfect and blessedly silent. Evan climbed into bed and fell asleep thinking about green dresses and honest conversations and the particular magic of being seen by someone who actually wanted to look. The next 3 months unfolded like a secret Evan and Rachel carried between them, precious and fragile, and theirs alone. At work, they were consummate professionals, nothing in their interactions suggesting anything beyond boss and employee. But after hours, they built something neither had expected to find. Dinners became routine. Rachel learned to cook alongside Evan in his kitchen while Mia did homework at the table. Movie nights happened on his couch, Rachel's head on his shoulder, Mia asleep between them more often than not. Weekend mornings meant pancakes and terrible cartoons and the slow, comfortable intimacy of people learning to fit their lives together. She's practically living here, Evan's sister observed one Sunday when she stopped by to drop off Mia's dance costume. Rachel was in the kitchen making coffee, barefoot and comfortable in Evan's oversized sweatshirt. She's not living here, Evan protested. She has a toothbrush in your bathroom. Her favorite coffee creamer's in your fridge. That's living here, Evan. Rachel appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs in hand. Should I be offended that you're discussing my residential status without me? Sarah laughed. Not offended, just aware that this is getting serious. It's been serious, Rachel said simply, handing Evan his coffee. We're just taking our time figuring out what that means. After Sarah left, Evan found Rachel staring out the kitchen window, something troubled in her expression. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She turned to face him. Your sister's right. This is getting serious, and we still haven't told anyone at work. We're still pretending this isn't happening. We agreed to be careful. I know, but careful is starting to feel like dishonest. Rachel set down her mug. Marcus asked me yesterday why I was in such a good mood lately. I wanted to tell him it's because I'm falling in love with you. Instead, I said I'd started drinking better coffee. Evan's heart stuttered. Falling in love? Don't pretend you haven't noticed. She moved closer. We're past falling, Evan. We fell. Now we're just trying to figure out how to land without breaking everything. Before he could respond, Mia burst into the kitchen, Sophia trailing behind her. Daddy, Rachel, can we show you our new dance routine? The moment dissolved into choreography and childhood enthusiasm, but the words hung between them. Falling in love. Past tense. Already done. That night, after the girls had their sleepover and the house was quiet, Evan and Rachel sat on the back porch wrapped in blankets against the November chill. I love you, Evan said into the darkness. I should have said it earlier when you brought it up, but Mia interrupted and then I got scared and now I'm just saying it because it's true and I'm tired of not saying it. Rachel turned to him, her face shadowed but her eyes reflecting moonlight. Say it again. I love you, Rachel Monroe. I love how you sing off key in my shower and steal my hoodies and make Mia laugh. I love how you're terrified of everything, but you show up anyway. I love that you see me, really see me, and you're still here. I love you too. Her voice was thick with emotion. I love that you're patient with my fears and gentle with my broken pieces, and you never make me feel like I have to be Ms. Monroe when I'm with you. I love that you let me be just Rachel. They kissed in the moonlight, slow and deep and full of promises neither had the words for yet. We need to tell people, Rachel said when they finally pulled apart. About us? It's not fair to keep hiding. Your job will be fine. Or it won't. But I can't keep pretending at work that you're just another employee when you're the person I'm building a life with. She took his hand. I'm going to HR on Monday. I'm going to disclose the relationship and whatever happens, happens. Rachel, you could lose everything. Or I could gain everything that actually matters. She squeezed his hand. You're worth the risk, Evan. We're worth the risk. Monday morning, Rachel walked into HR at 8 a.m. and disclosed her relationship with Evan Brooks. By noon, she was in a meeting with the board. By 5 p.m., the entire office was buzzing with speculation. Evan was in his office trying to focus on spreadsheets when Marcus appeared in his doorway. So, you and Monroe? Yeah, me and Rachel. How long? 3 months, give or take. Marcus whistled. Damn, Brooks. You really know how to keep a secret. He paused. For what it's worth, I think it's good. She's been different lately. Happier. I didn't know why until today, but it makes sense now. After Marcus left, Evan's phone rang. Rachel's extension. Come to my office? He found her standing at her window. The same position she'd been in months ago when she'd told him about her ex-husband's affair. What did they say? Evan asked. Rachel turned and her face was unreadable. They said, I have a choice to make. Evan's stomach dropped. I can stay in my position and you can transfer to a different department where I have no authority over you. Or, she paused, or I can step down and find another role, either at the company or somewhere else. What did you tell them? I told them I need to talk to you first, because this isn't just my decision anymore. She moved closer. What do you want, Evan? He thought about the past 3 months, about coffee in his kitchen and Mia's laughter and Rachel's head on his shoulder during movies, about falling in love and being seen and building something real. I want you, he said simply. I want us, whatever that looks like. Even if it means one of us leaving the company? Even then, Rachel exhaled, something settling in her features. I'm going to step down. From my position, I mean. Stay with the company, but take a lateral move to a different department where we're not in the same chain of command. You do that? I already decided. The board meeting was just a formality. She took his hands. I've spent 2 years building my career back after the divorce. And it matters to me. It does. But you matter more. What we're building matters more. Rachel, let me finish. I'm not sacrificing my career for you. I'm choosing a different path because I want a life that has room for both professional success and personal happiness. And I can't have both if I'm your boss. Evan pulled her into his arms, held her like she might disappear. I love you. I love you too, even though you're making me completely rearrange my life. You're rearranging your own life. I'm just along for the ride. She laughed against his chest. Some ride. The transition took 6 weeks. Rachel moved to a senior consultant role in a different division, no longer Evan's direct supervisor. The office gossip eventually died down, replaced by new scandals and fresh drama. And slowly, carefully, Evan and Rachel built a life that felt less like a secret and more like a foundation. Christmas came with its own revelations. Mia asked if Rachel could spend Christmas Eve with them, and Evan found himself setting a third place at the table for the first time in 3 years. They made cookies and watched holiday movies, and Rachel helped Mia hang ornaments on the tree while Evan pretended not to notice how right it all felt. Daddy? Mia asked as he tucked her in that night. Is Rachel going to be my new mom? Evan's breath caught. Would you want that? I already have a mom. In heaven. But I think I could have a Rachel too. They're different things. Yeah, sweetheart, they are. Good. Because I really like her, and she makes you smile like you used to before Mommy got sick. Evan kissed his daughter's forehead, overwhelmed by her wisdom. I really like her too. New Year's Eve found them at Sarah's house for a party, surrounded by friends and family and the comfortable chaos of people who'd watched them fall in love. At midnight, when the countdown ended and everyone kissed, Evan held Rachel close and thought about the year that was ending and the one beginning. Make a resolution? Rachel asked. Just one. Stop being scared of happiness. That's a good one. Mind if I steal it? It's yours. Everything's yours. By February, Rachel's toothbrush wasn't just visiting Evan's bathroom. Her clothes had colonized half his closet. By March, they'd stopped pretending she didn't live there. By April, Evan was looking at rings. He told his sister first, sitting in her kitchen while the girls had dance practice. I want to ask Rachel to marry me. Sarah smiled like she'd been waiting for this. About time. Is it too soon? We've only been together 6 months. You've been building toward this since the night you brought her home drunk and made sure she was safe. The official relationship might be 6 months old, but this has been growing for longer than that. What if she says no? She won't. How do you know? Because my sister looks at you the way your wife used to look at you, like you're the answer to questions she didn't know she was asking. Evan bought the ring 2 days later, a simple diamond on a gold band, elegant without being ostentatious. He carried it in his pocket for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. The moment came on an ordinary Tuesday in May. Rachel was in his kitchen making dinner while Mia practiced piano in the living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting everything gold. It was completely mundane and absolutely perfect. Rachel. She turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand. Evan pulled the ring box from his pocket, opened it. Marry me. The spoon clattered to the floor. What? Marry me. Build a life with me. Help me raise Mia. Let me love you for the rest of my life. He moved closer. I know it's fast and probably crazy, and we should probably have discussed this first, but I don't want to wait anymore. I want you to be my wife. Rachel's hands covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Yes. Yes? Yes, of course, yes. She launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both over. I love you so much. Yes, I'll marry you. From the living room, Mia's piano playing stopped. Did Rachel just say yes to something? She said yes to marrying your dad, Rachel called back, laughing and crying at the same time. Finally, Mia appeared in the doorway. I was wondering when you were going to ask her. Aunt Sarah said it would be soon. Evan laughed, overwhelmed. You all knew about this? Everyone knew except Rachel, Mia said matter-of-factly. You're not very good at keeping secrets, Daddy. They were married 6 months later in Sarah's backyard, the same place where they'd reconnected at Sophia's birthday party. It was small and intimate, close friends, family, and the people who'd watched them fall in love and build something real. Mia was the flower girl, taking her role with utmost seriousness. She wore a dress she'd picked out herself and carried roses with the focused intensity of someone holding something precious. When Rachel walked down the makeshift aisle, Evan felt his breath catch. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she was crying before she even reached him. You okay? He whispered when she took his hands. I'm perfect. This is perfect. The ceremony was officiated by Sarah, who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion. She spoke about love that grows from kindness, about second chances and new beginnings, about how the best things in life often start with someone showing up when they don't have to. When it came time for vows, Evan spoke first. Rachel, when I brought you home that night last year, I thought I was just being decent, just doing what anyone would do. I had no idea I was saving my own life. His voice cracked. You taught me that loving again doesn't mean forgetting what came before, that my heart was big enough for both my past and my future, that being safe isn't the same as being invisible. He squeezed her hands. I promise to see you, to choose you, to show up for you every single day, to be your partner in everything, to love you for exactly who you are. Rachel was full-on crying now, mascara running, not caring at all. Evan, you gave me dignity when I didn't deserve it. You made me believe that good men still exist, that I could trust again, that I was worthy of real love. She took a shaky breath. You and Mia gave me a family I didn't know I was missing, a home I didn't think I'd find again. And I promise to honor that gift every single day, to be the partner you deserve, the mother figure Mia needs, the person who sees you and never looks away. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden when they finally kissed as husband and wife. The reception was joyful chaos. Marcus gave a speech about how he'd known something was going on when Evan started smiling at his desk for no reason. Sarah talked about watching two broken people find each other and become whole. Mia stood on a chair and announced that she now had 2 moms and the best dad in the world, and everyone applauded. As the sun set and fairy lights twinkled overhead, Evan and Rachel danced their first dance to a song Mia had helped pick out. Around them, their people celebrated, but Evan was only aware of Rachel in his arms, solid and real and his. Happy? She whispered. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. Me too. She laid her head on his shoulder. Thank you for bringing me home that night. Thank you for being brave enough to ask for help. They swayed together as the music played, and Evan thought about the journey that had brought them here, about a drunk phone call and a difficult question and the choice to show up when he didn't have to, about being seen and choosing courage and learning that love doesn't diminish. It expands. 6 months later, Rachel officially adopted Mia. The courthouse ceremony was simple, but the impact was profound. Mia got 2 mothers, one in heaven, one on earth, and Rachel got the daughter she'd never thought she'd have. That night, the 3 of them sat at their kitchen table. The same table where Rachel had once stood terrified and Evan had offered her dignity, and made plans for a future that felt limitless. We should get a dog, Mia announced. Absolutely not, Evan and Rachel said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. We're definitely getting a dog, Rachel conceded. Definitely getting a dog, Evan agreed. Mia cheered and Rachel leaned over to kiss Evan, and somewhere in the ordinariness of the moment, Evan felt something settle in his chest. This was it. This was the life he'd been too scared to want, the happiness he'd thought he didn't deserve, the future he'd built from one night of choosing kindness over convenience. Years later, when people asked how they met, Rachel would tell the story honestly, about being drunk and lost and broken, about the employee who brought her home when he should have just called a cab, about a question that hurt but needed to be asked. He gave me dignity when I had none, she'd say, and somehow that grew into love. Evan's version was simpler. She needed help. I helped. Everything else just followed. But they both knew the truth was more complicated than either story captured. It was about showing up, about being seen, about choosing courage when fear would have been easier, about learning that sometimes the worst moments of your life can become the foundation for the best ones. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Evan and Rachel stood in their backyard, their own now, not Sarah's, watching Mia and her younger brother play with the dog they'd inevitably gotten. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, exactly like that night Evan had driven home from Sophia's party, questioning everything. "Do you ever think about that night?" Rachel asked, leaning into his side. "Which night?" "The night you saved my life." "I didn't save your life. I just made sure you got home safe." Rachel turned to face him, her eyes serious. "You saved my life, Evan. You just didn't realize you were doing it." He kissed her forehead, pulled her closer. "Then I guess we saved each other." "Yeah, I guess we did." They stood together in the fading light, watching their children play, grateful for drunk phone calls and difficult questions, and the particular magic that happens when someone sees you at your worst and chooses to stay anyway. Because that's what love is, really. Not the grand gestures or the perfect moments, but the choice to show up, to be present, to see someone clearly, and decide they're worth the risk of being seen in return. Evan had made that choice on a Friday night when he could have easily driven home to his daughter. Rachel had made it on a Saturday morning when she could have run from her embarrassment, and they kept making it every day after, in small moments and large ones, in mundane mornings and spectacular celebrations, in the ordinary, extraordinary life they built together. It wasn't the story either of them had expected, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect.